that moves us to new business. Can I have a motion to pass item 12.1, resolution concerning APPR,
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
I'll read the resolution first, then we can talk about it. Okay. This is a resolution concerning APPR hardship waiver. Be it so resolved that, despite meeting with our collective bargaining units to negotiate in good faith regarding establishment of a new APPR plan under Education Law 3012D, we have been unable to reach agreement in the time period necessary to complete our APPR application. Therefore, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education authorizes the district to submit an APPR hardship waiver to the New York State Education Department on or before October 30th, 2015, deadline and consistent with the provisions of Education Law 3012D. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I guess by way of a little background, one of the important things for everyone to understand about APPR negotiations, which this is a letter that's written not so much to describe us, but to qualify us for the waiver, is that since No Child Left Behind, and then actually more since Race to the Top, we've been required to negotiate aspects of the evaluation process of teachers with the teachers' union. In my mind, this was a great folly. Management shouldn't have to negotiate evaluation systems, and we never did before this reform movement. I think it's weakened schools, and I think it's created a kind of a bureaucratic morass. At any rate, we were required to negotiate our current APPR when Race to the Top came in. As you probably know, last April, in an 11th hour deal, the governor passed the budget and created some new APPR laws, which were not covered by previous negotiations, so we're back negotiating again. The state would like us to have begun negotiating at the, essentially to have begun negotiating in August and have an entire new staff evaluation system prepared by November 1st, which is absurd. They say they want good evaluation, and then they come up with ridiculous timelines like that in order to meet ridiculous laws like the one that was passed in April, and which our legislators voted for because they didn't have any choice, they said. So this is a bit ridiculous. So at any rate, as you might imagine, negotiating an entire new evaluation system, which you shouldn't have to do in the first place, is not reasonable to do in 2 months, so we're not ready. The state thinks it's magnanimous of them to grant waivers to districts that have not been able to resolve it in 2 months, so we're applying for such a waiver.
Very good.
Probably says it, doesn't it?
It sure does. That's good. Any comments?
They justified their short timeline. They called it an emergency, which is the only way that they could do it on such a short timeline without going through a lengthy process, as I understand. As I understand it. So they call it an emergency, and then the state education department says, oh, well, we'll help you out. Statewide, everybody is declaring hardship. It's ridiculous.
Ridiculous. All right, so any other
So we-
comments or
So
questions?
we have prepared I guess this is the point, the factual point, we have prepared a waiver at which we documented that we tried in good faith to negotiate all of this, and I've written minutes and agendas to show the state what we've been doing. That's all been prepared. We've written a waiver request. However, unless I sign that I'm totally responsible for any errors, and you say that I've sworn that to you, they won't approve the waiver, so you need to pass a resolution.
Okay.
And
So
we're still negotiating.
We're still negotiating.
That's the important.
that's the thing. Okay, so no more questions? Okay, all in favor of passing this hardship waiver for APPR? Okay, it is passed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, and that brings us back to item 12.2, which was awarding, rejecting bid for the transportation facility improvement. Can I have a motion to award, reject the bid?
Award and reject.
The rejection was for the bus wash equipment itself.
Right.
Award / reject bid for
Okay,
the
I'll
transportation
move that.
facility. Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
Okay. You wanna talk about
I
it?
know you wanted to hear some little history on this and have some more discussion prior to voting. The history of this is quite long. It goes back probably about 7 years now, maybe 8, where originally it was going to be a joint project between the town and the school district with some grant monies available. The school district went out and voted, and the community voted no 2 times to go out and bond this project in one bond issue. We then went back, because the need still remained, to do material renovations to the bus garage. The plan turned into saying, let's take it into chunks, and the idea was we would have 4 pieces, phase 1 through 4. Phase 1 was regarding the water runoff into the wetlands area. So phase 1 really dealt with parking and drainage. When we do a project, it's a lengthy permitting process where our permits don't go through the town, they go through the State Education Department, facilities planning. Their projects that go into facilities planning may take 1 year or longer to get approval, depending on their complexity and size. This we happen to get fairly fast, quick turnaround on the approval. So phase 1 was done fairly timely in the big picture as we see it now, and it came in well under budget. So the funding for the savings from that project rolls over into available funding for the other phases. Phase 2 was the installation of bus wash equipment, and at that point we had a Quonset hut. The Quonset hut was used for storage. We felt it'd be better used for thorough washing of all of our buses. The district experiences, we'll call it premature loss of some of our vehicles that are mechanically sound, but the frames tend to rust out with chemical and corrosive agents that are used on our highways. So we're losing buses. This year is no exception. We'll lose 2 buses sooner than we should. We have investigated taking those buses and having the frames redone. When I tried it a couple years ago, once they got the bus off, the body off the frame, they couldn't put it back together. It was so rusted. So that's what we're finding with our buses when I'm told by our mechanics and the state, when they inspect them, DOT, these buses are done. They are done at that point. So we run them for as long as we can. So that was phase 2. Phase 3 was the renovation of the office area, which includes the dispatcher, the secretary, and the director of transportation, including a room for the drivers. Part of this renovation was going to be to allow for an instructional space for the training requirements of the bus drivers, which will also be used as, we'll call it a break room, but it's really primarily for educational purposes for the bus drivers. That project, if it went the way it should have, would have been done probably about 4 years ago at this point. All during this time, we're seeing, we'll call it inflation creep on the project, so the costs are increasing as we're waiting. During the wait time for the approval for phase 2, which is I'm sorry, I'm backing up, on phase 2 for the bus wash equipment, the building that it was supposed to house, the Quonset hut, collapsed under a snow load. So that building collapsed. So now we have another issue that we don't have approval for the equipment. Now the building it was supposed to go into is gone. So sticking to our financial plan, the 4th year came around for phase 4 of the bus garage project, which include finishing whatever we need to do interior-wise and adding some additional parking spaces behind the, which is on the Crittenton side, behind the bus garage. So the approval for phase 2 then got delayed because now we're going to have an add-alt to phase 2 saying now we're going to add a building to the equipment. So we went back to the state and said, well, now we're going to have building added to this equipment, and because it's sensitive to the wetlands, we had to go through additional approvals by wetland commissions, as well as the Department of Environmental Protection had to sign off on this. So that approval probably took, it was well over a year to get approval for that. At that point, these other projects are ready to go, so determined that it'd be in our best interest to bundle all these projects together where we sit tonight. So the remaining 3 phases we could do under one project, and we once again had to file for project approval for phase 3 and 4, which we just got approval right at the end of last fiscal year. So that brings us up to where we are now, where in July we went out for a bid, and it was July 20th when we opened the bids. Unfortunately, we only had one general contractor submitted a bid for the general construction. We had competitive bid for the other trades. The other trades, plumbing, mechanical, electrical. So we had competitive bids for those 3. We did not feel it was appropriate to award because of the general construction. That bid alone exceeded all of our funding for all 4 phases of the project. So that was rejected, and we went back out a second time. This bid that you're being asked to vote on tonight is still higher than we originally anticipated. We took the second bid opportunity to break it into pieces. So we'd have the base bid, which is everything we had planned on doing, plus the alternate one, which is the replacement of the Quonset hut building. When those bids came in, the total with everything all in is, which you're being asked to vote on tonight, is $2,097,133. Doing some quick math, you'd say, all right, how far over is the base bid? The base bid is approximately $200,000 higher than we had originally planned. We received very minimal amount of insurance recovery from the loss of the Quonset hut. It wasn't a very valuable building. We received $33,000 for that. Very non-substantial. Because we're going to be putting up a manufactured building versus a bricks and mortar building, it'll allow us to, ironically, buy less expensive bus wash equipment that doesn't have to be custom fit to fit into the destroyed Quonset hut. I know I'm telling you a lot of information, but what I've given the board is a breakdown of the remaining costs of this project, so that you can see that we do have the funding available to pay for this. It's some choices that need to be made in terms of what those best choices are. It'll still cost more money than we originally anticipated many years ago when we started this project. I'm not sure if it went too far or any questions?
I think the main clarification I would like to make is we're going to talk later about the specific funding, but the key question is, will this create any additional tax obligation?
Not based on the funding that's available to finish this project. What we're finding every time we wait, the inflation creep
Right.
is eating away any kind of opportunities to save more money. We're not going to save more money by waiting longer.
But there isn't going to be a new tax because of it either?
No.
Okay.
Are there any questions, comments? Okay. All right, thank you for explaining that. Then we have a motion on the table. So all in favor of awarding the bids that are out there for the transportation facility?
The motion, yep.
The motions are out there, right? Yep. Okay, thank you very much for explaining that. All right, and that brings us to staff reports. Bill?
All right. Number one, I would like to tell you 2 really good things. Many times at this table, we've recognized science research students who have been successful in the Intel Science Research Competition. This year, we have, for the first time, a student who's a finalist in the Siemens Westinghouse, which is a parallel competition. That has not been our main focus in the past, but certainly want to congratulate Dominic Rowan. He's been named a finalist in the Seaman Westinghouse Science Research Competition. He's one of 60 students out of 1,700 who applied, and he will compete now for up to $100,000 in scholarship money. Dominic collaborated on a project to determine the frequency of planets outside our solar system with properties similar to Jupiter. And this was particularly important because Jupiter is thought to be responsible in many ways for our solar system being physically the way that it is. He did this work at the McDonald Observatory with a mentor at University of Texas, Austin. And he also was able to highlight a previously unknown planet and characterize its properties. So, sounds impressive to me. Congratulations to Dominic.
It's fantastic.
I was still learning how to change oil in my car when I was in senior in high school. So that was great. Along similar lines, you know, I get annual college admissions reports, and a couple of times I've done reports to the entire community through Bobcat TV. This year, I received a report from Guidance on the class of 2015, and it's a most remarkable report. This year, as you know, one of the ways I don't want to say we evaluate, but one of the ways we measure college success is by the competitiveness of the schools that students are admitted to. And that study allows each student only one college to be admitted to. It's not like, you know, somebody got into all of the Ivy Leagues and they count multiple times. So in the class of 2015, 52% of the graduating class was accepted at Tier 1 colleges, which is just outstanding for a public school. Tier 1 colleges represent about the top 12% of colleges in the nation. So last year, our average student went to a Tier 1 college, you know, which is pretty amazing. So congratulations to the class of 2015. And to the faculty and counselors who helped them. Also want to mention that tomorrow night, the Byram Hills Education Foundation will be having a special event at the Modern Barn to recognize donors who have been particularly loyal to the program. And I'll be there, and some of the other senior administrators in the district, to thank them for their contributions. A lot of exciting things happening with the foundation. We talked about it last time, and we'll talk about it more in the future. And lastly, I'd like to mention that this week I went to the, if you're wondering if I sounded annoyed about the APPR, it's because I went to the New York State School Board Association meeting in the city and heard our new commissioner and our chancellor speak. And I don't want to overstate it. But it just feels like such a futile effort that's being made at that level. Everything was very pleasant. Everybody had good reasons for everything they're doing. But the sense that any progress is being made or that the real problems are being addressed is just not apparent. And the hard questions, I don't think, are being asked or answered. We'll continue our work. Certainly Brett and Scott represent us well in advocacy work. I have a meeting with a group of 5 superintendents who we've made it our mission to annoy the chancellor, I think. I have a meeting with her and the commissioner coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll certainly confront them about these things. I think our PTSA is working on having an evening to try and inform parents. There was a little bit of good news. The new commissioner has kind of unilaterally decided that the standardized tests this spring will be shorter. You know, her biggest complaint was that they were too long. And she has unilaterally directed the testing company to shorten those tests, still maintain valid testing results, I assume. And she is also leading a review of the Common Core, and I will be sending a link to that review to everyone in the community as soon as I get it. And what she would like to do is collect feedback from anybody who has specific concerns that parts of the Common Core are not appropriate to an age level or not being constructed well. One of my questions for her is, you've got literally hundreds of thousands of test response items about the Common Core. I hope you're going to use those to evaluate the Common Core also. But I'll be sending that out to everybody. And, while I say it's futile, I intend to remain active in arguing with them.
No, we appreciate that. So that's a survey that's going to be coming out to everybody?
Yes.
Survey?
Yes.
Okay.
There are 2 other states that have done it. And so she's taking the technology and the model that they use to try to survey teachers, administrators, school board members, and parents to try to get feedback, and then they're going to somehow distill the feedback and then recommend a series of changes to the curriculums. This is a little bit less about testing, but more about, is the K through 2 curriculum too developmentally challenging, and should some of that content be pushed to higher grades? Is the new way of learning math the right way, or should we be tweaking that? It sounded like it was issues around the curriculum.
Okay.
But nothing on the implementation or the growth or APPR?
Well,
She doesn't have much she can do about it. They bungled it to the point where the governor got involved, and now it's law.
Yeah. She indicated to me at this thing I attended a couple of weeks ago that she was open to revisions to APPR in terms of that growth measure, so...
Seems so. Even the chancellor said that. But my argument is that chancellor got us in this boat.
I mean, what the chancellor said, which I thought was interesting yesterday, is she explicitly said that I'm not in favor of decoupling
Right.
test scores and
Delinking, she was saying.
teacher evaluations,
Right,
but
right.
I am a fan of making the amount more modest. So what that means to me is maybe not at 50%, but maybe at 20%. We go back to where we were before,
Yeah.
which is still not the right answer, but obviously at least incrementally better than where we are today. And a big change from what we heard out of Albany even a couple months ago.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas what the commissioner was slightly different in her tone, because what she said when asked about the high stakes testing was, well, yes, there's a lot of concern about the growth scores, but don't worry, because there's a new process for teachers to go through to appeal. And oh, by the way, there hasn't been a teacher fired yet for their growth score. But that doesn't
It doesn't
answer
answer
the
the-
question, is this the right system, is this a good system, is this a fair system, which we know that it's
And you spent so much
Flawed.
time on it.
so, and why are we spending so much time on it, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think that with the chancellor's comments, at least it opens up the hope that there'll be change.
Right. Okay. Thank
That's
you.
my report. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. And Greg?
Thank you. Originally, I was going to talk about transportation.
I think you did.
I'm tired of that, to tell you the truth. But I will share some good news since we're in the good news section of our agenda. We had applied for a government efficiency plan with the state. That's kind of been lost in the APPR noise and other issues we're dealing with. In order for our taxpayers who are eligible or STAR eligible to receive a rebate of their tax increase, we would need to be tax compliant under the tax levy cap, which we are, and also have our government efficiency plan approved. We filed that by the deadline, which was June 1st, and the Division of Budget was responsible for reviewing it and either rejecting it or accepting it. They had until July 31st to let us know. They let us know on October 14th, but it's good news regardless of the timing of it.
Yeah.
But it shows how deadlines work from the state. We meet our deadlines, but others don't. But the good news is that STAR eligible taxpayers will receive not only a rebate for this year's tax increase, but the prior year's tax increase too, so they'll get double a rebate, which is good news for a good portion of our taxpayers.
Oh, that's good.
When it comes out is anybody's guess. That was the first question everyone started asking. When will these checks be mailed? Last year, they were supposed to be out, I believe, in October, but some of them were not mailed until February, March. So It's anybody's guess, but the check is in the mail.
So is it a good, this probably might not be a fair question, is it a good bet that if you got a rebate check in the past, you would be eligible again? Is it the same rules?
Right, you get that check plus
Good.
the following years.
Good.
So it's good news for taxpayers.
All right, good, thank you. Okay, and Tim?
Sure.
So I have a brief slides presentation for you. Just continuing the good news, which is the reason we do all this work. Excuse me, Scott. Oh, sorry. What's that? So I want to give an update on our STEAM curriculum. It is a board goal, and I want to give some frequent updates on it. I'm going to show you one aspect of our STEAM curriculum. And this is our HCC technology curriculum. You might recall from 2 weeks ago, Dr. Taylor spoke about revising our tech curriculum and having it in 6th through 8th grade. We have 3 modules this year, which is robotics, coding, and multimedia. So I'm going to show you one aspect of it, which will be our robotics curriculum. And so we have our students doing problem-based learning around the robotics, where there's about 9 tasks that students have to complete during their 20-day cycle of technology. So students learn how to program the robots by watching short videos, and then they work collaboratively to learn the tasks to manipulate the robot. And what you see here within it, they also have videos that show the real-life example of the task that they're completing. In this case, this is an autonomous tractor in farming crops so that a robot can collect like apples or whatever type of fruits or vegetables from farming. So they can see the real-life application, so they're not learning in isolation, they're seeing how this stuff actually really applies. So here you see students learning, here they're testing out the robot, and then you also see as they're testing it, they might have to revise it. So they have to learn, for example, what the code is for turning the wheels and turning each wheel. So if they want to make a 90-degree turn, they have to figure out the ratio of the wheel to the number of rotations and how far it turns it. And this is the board upon which they have to do their final task. It performs a particular function following the outline of the task. So students get engaged, they sit there, they revise it in real time, they're trying to constantly test it out. And then when they think they finally have it, they go to the board and they test out the robot to see if they met the challenge. If they don't meet it, they can go back and do it again, but they do lose points. And by points, I don't mean points on a grade. It's sort of like gaming theory. So they get points for accumulating the task on the first try, the second try, the third try, and they lose points each time. So their goal is to try to just keep accumulating more points. So it operates on game theory. Our STEAM curriculum is based on this innovative classroom model, where we're trying to move from a traditional classroom to an innovative classroom. For example, in that first line, an individual experience to group or collaborative experiences. We're moving away from students being afraid to take risks to where students recognize the importance of learning through an iterative process of failing and testing and failing again until they get it right. So what I'm going to show you now is a very short videotape. So that same classroom I was in, which was an 8th grade curriculum, I just took my phone and videotaped for a moment. This was the 4th day of this 20-day cycle where the students were in the classroom, and I want you to see how you'll experience elements of this innovative classroom model in this. So you can talk through it. The sound's not great on it, but you'll see what we mean by this type of innovative model that's fundamental to our STEAM curriculum. So you'll see them working in groups. You always get one kid who has to wave at the camera. Every time I took a picture, he was waving. I said, "One picture, please, where you don't wave." So a group was testing it out. They come over to the board. They wait while the other group is testing it out. That's our technology teacher, Crittenden, Dawn Selness. Kid asked her a question. She sort of shrugged. That was her answer. I wonder. Going over to other groups, you notice that they're all working in either pairs or triads. These students they program it, they watch the videos, they program it on their computers, they test out the robot. And then will it work? It's all autonomous, so they have to program it ahead of time, press a button. Did it turn the way she wanted it to or not? They think about it. Figuring out what do we have to do? Is it doing what we thought it would do? In real time, they get that feedback on whether it worked or not.
So it's like 53 plus 22.
And sometimes the kinesthetic experience where they need to physically move and test it out. So I cycle back around the room. You see the students really focus on each of those groups, working together to figure it out.
Okay, you guys did Disney drill on your first one, right? We haven't done it. You didn't do Disney? Not yet. How do we do Disney? Raj is going around. We should be doing Disney before you board.
It's like a little more.
So they did that real life test, and this goes on for a few more seconds. They go to the board, they try it out, they come back together to work on solving the problem. So
Why is it doing that?
this is what's happening in the classroom. Fourth day of the cycle, and the students are already giving into this model of the classroom where they can be independent, they can work together, they realize the power of working together. When I interview them, they love that ability to think about it on their own. They know the teacher's there to help them if they need it, but they're not relying on the teacher. What amazed me the most when I watched this over is you don't see students asking for the teacher's help. You don't see that constant, I don't understand. You see them trying to figure it out, which is really powerful. And they go back to it again after coming together. So there's that real intrinsic motivation to figure this out because they want to do well. Another few seconds.
Oh, we start behind.
Pause it? Yeah.
Are we supposed to?
So just kind of a tangent. This room used to be, have long tables with desktop computers, and students might learn things like spreadsheets, or they might write papers, or do a little research on the computer, write a paper. The activities we've done in the last couple of years in terms of our abilities with wireless, our abilities to, well, to create a much more sophisticated technology class experience for the students, I think is just remarkable. And then if you think about these are kids who are going to be going to high school, and the opportunities that they might have, if they liked it, to explore programming or to get interested in physics and engineering, are so much greater than they were before. This is also a room, at this point what we have in there is pretty makeshift. But this is a room that we'd like to turn into a focus for our technology program. We really think the key place is not the high school, but the middle school.
To get them interested,
Yeah,
you're saying at that point.
to get them interested and to let them play and get a broad knowledge of the field so they can make choices when they get to high school, because you can't play for too long at high school.
So how much technology do they have in the 8th grade year? So it's a 20-day module. Is it?
And they do 2 cycles.
Two
of it,
cycles.
So 2 20-day cycles.
Is that similar in the earlier in 7th grade too, or is it 8th grade where it's really
6th, 7th, and 8th.
all 3 years?
6th, 7th, and 8th.
With
So
5
the next
years from
challenge,
now,
and it'll be a good challenge,
we'll
is
be talking
that now
about
you'll have
Wambas.
so much excitement in the high school for
Really.
these activities.
Yeah, we're anticipating that at the high school. How is that going to impact the coding as more kids come in interested? We also have a coding club and a robotics club at the high school, 2 separate clubs, which each have over 30 students in each of those clubs. So there's a real interest in it.
You can definitely envision a world where
I was down at the high school today and talking to the principal in the hallway, and he stops a student and says, "Oh, thanks for donating the go-kart," the students in the robotics club. And it kind of took me back to, again, when I was a kid learning to change oil. But the robotics club is going to take this go-kart and, if not soup it up the way we did in the past, but effectively they're taking it and they're going to manipulate it and create new stuff out of it.
Is there demand for more or different computer science classes in the high school? So not more sections of the same,
It's
but
growing
different-
organically. It's growing a little bit beyond our capacity. It happened fast, and they're not easy easy courses to develop overnight. But yeah, there is.
Right.
Right, and like what you were saying, it's going to change even more as these kids
That's
from
right.
middle school come up and they are demanding those kind of classes.
Well, we have AP Computer Science, I would imagine.
We do.
And we
Right.
have
We
an
do.
intro to computer science that's an elective for any age group who can take it. It's a prerequisite to the AP, unless students come in with strong computer programming, which we do, which will
Some,
waive that
yeah.
prerequisite.
I was struck by how quiet the classroom was, and also how, not that I could make anything turn, but it was a small thing that I think, I would have thought, oh, kids would be frustrated by that, because it's sort of one maneuver, a great deal of work leading up to executing that one maneuver. And, now with so many electronics relatively inexpensively that kids have that sort of do more when they take it out of the box, their dedication to getting it to work themselves for something that they could probably go out and buy something for $25 someplace, but they're so invested in getting their program, their project to work in incremental steps. I think is really impressive.
Yeah, I think there's two things that lead to that. One is they have a larger task to complete, and they're motivated to do that because they're learning about it on their
Right,
own,
yeah.
and it relates to something they can imagine. And two, when they're doing the little tasks, they get immediate feedback. If it was supposed to turn at a right angle right and turn left, they know, well, wait, it went the wrong way, let's go back, and they have an interest to solve it because it's immediate.
It's nice because it's the antithesis of this sort of instant gratification, which you can hear so much about people wanting. And this is something that you really have a bigger project you're working towards, and you really have to develop at incremental steps, get it right at each step before you move on.
It was also interesting to see the collaboration that was going on, the partnership, because that could be something that could be a pretty solitary thing to do, but yet they were, I'm sure that was some part of what they're supposed to do, but they were working collaboratively. It was interesting to see.
Back when Bill was changing oil, I was programming computers. And learning that in high school, and it was very
Solitary.
Solitary,
It was
yeah.
all just by yourself to make my name
Right.
turn upside down or something like that. That's
You'd
been
see
hours
them-
to do something ridiculous.
You'd see them problem solving together.
And then I'd show my friends who didn't care. They're like, that's really stupid.
Looked you down.
And now it is.
That was 15 years after I was changing oil.
Yeah.
But this style of learning just seems so much more analogous to how students are going to need to live in the world after they graduate, regardless of what work setting they're in, versus the old-fashioned model of a teacher up there giving a lecture. It's amazing.
What's great about middle school is kids are social. They want to interact, they want to work together, and now we're giving them an opportunity to be social within an academic environment. And the freedom to sort of learn at their own pace, and it's not a race to see who does the task first. And when you look at the board, the kids self-report on where they are, how many times it took them to complete the task. There are students that have done 5 of the challenges, some that are only at 2. And it doesn't matter, they're not worried about what the other group's doing.
Having encapsulates more of different learning styles too, because you may get a group of learners, and 1 or 2 may be visual, another one may be an auditory or whatever, but if you're sort of working collaboratively with that, you all bring different skill sets to problem solving, and something that a visual learner could look at and say, oh, if we just sort of turn it this way, it would work, or try it this way. It's nice that all those skills can get reinforced no matter what kind of learning you want.
Thank you for bringing that to us. It's
Sure,
great
thanks.
to see it like that, too.
This is a great way to do reports, yeah.
It really is.
Good, bring it to life.
Thank you. Jen?
Bring yours to
Now
life.
the segue.
Can you talk that?
Bring this to life.
I have no video. This is,
Maybe robots?
we'd like to do a little report for the board's edification on our Title IX compliance. Title IX, as you know, is a federal law that is prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sex. What that looks like in a school system could be the form of sexual harassment. It could even be unequal opportunity for students in sports, gender issues. But basically what we're looking to prevent is a hostile work environment that is created based upon an actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender, or sex of an individual. So to that end, the board has appointed, as you know, Jill Boynton and I as the Title IX officers for the district, and that means that Jill and I went through training. I did it a couple of years ago, and Jill just recently did it, in which we start to think about how we handle complaints, how we handle investigations, what levels of confidentiality have to occur in such cases, and how we train the faculty and staff. That's been a crucial piece for me for the past couple of years, to train everybody in that venue. And it being important, I mean, we do have a federal case that's occurring in a Westchester school right now for sex-based harassment with a teacher and a principal. And we do have blooming issues on the horizon of transgender students that, you know, there could be issues with that. And we, first and foremost, feel that we need to provide that edification for our faculty and staff so that we're prepared for any changes that might occur, and that people are aware of the types of behavior they should be exhibiting and the types of behavior they should be reporting, so that we know how to deal with it.
I think
Thank
that's fantastic that you're being proactive on that. In most districts, wait till it's a problem and it blows up in one of the schools and the parents suing the district because the district hasn't sorted it out in advance and
It's very true.
thought about it.
Within the past month, all of the buildings during their faculty meetings on Wednesday have been receiving a presentation by the assistant principal on transgender issues and transgender students, transgender law, and how they're supposed to be handling that. Not that we're, whether we're having that situation or not doesn't matter. It's really sensitizing our faculty and staff to what to expect and what are the appropriate behaviors that they should have.
And we just updated our policy along
Yeah.
those lines not too long ago too, so we're,
Yeah, we have our
On top of it.
sex-based harassment policy, which really includes that language, and also, you know, another important piece too is that the unacceptable, in our policy, it says the unacceptable behavior has to be sufficiently severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive to be considered sex-based harassment. So, you know, having a policy like this in place protects us also from an individual doing something that's wrong, recognizing it's wrong and trying to remedy a situation and avoid doing it again.
any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. All right, and that brings us to board reports. And President's report, I attended, Brett and Scott also. We had a meeting with our Assemblyman and West Putt, David Buckwell, to talk about our district's legislative priorities. And there's going to be one with Senator Lattimore, I think, in another 2 weeks. Brings us to committees and board member reports. Who'd like to talk first?
I have just a couple of quick things. First, I guess from the foundation's perspective, there was a board meeting last week. Phil talked about the event tomorrow night. I think they're gearing up at this point for the STEAM initiative and for raising money for that grant through now the fall into the end of the year cycle. So there's a lot of excitement and I think a lot of support for that. And I was thinking this video would be great to show at some point to them as well, because it really, I think, puts into play a lot of what we're talking about. It makes it easy to visualize. I guess on advocacy and our meeting with Buck Walden, and then some of the events that happened over the last couple of days when there was a school board association meeting, which Brett will talk about, I'm sure. I think one takeaway that I have is that we have come a long way, it seems like, in the sentiment, certainly from a political perspective, between where things were 6, 9, 12 months ago and now, meaning that there has been so much noise made around the policies with testing and teacher evaluations that at least it's forcing the dialogue to happen, which 6 or 9 months ago, they were just closing their ears saying, we're done, we've made the law, no more. It's going to take courage for someone in Albany to stand up and say, okay, this is the legislation that's going to fix the problem. And I think that we're at this juncture now where the more pressure that we all can apply through our PTSA and through the Superintendent Association and us as school board members and the community as voters onto the system, like now is the time to apply it, because with the Governor's Commission and with the regents trying to think through what changes they might advocate for via the legislature and then ultimately for the legislature to take action, it's going to, I think, take just the will of the people. Push forward on the politicians to make some of these changes a reality. But this is the window where it's actually possible, I think, for the first time in a while. So, although I'm definitely cynical as well, and I think a lot of what we heard in the last couple of days was not that helpful, there is this feeling that something could happen. specifically, with at least reducing down dramatically the role of high-stakes testing in the evaluation process, which I think is the heart of the issue.
I only get really cynical when I'm exposed to them a lot, so I spent 2 hours with them yesterday.
It's hard when you're hearing the same things again, you feel like you're, but you just have to keep at it.
Yep, you do.
Yeah, and the biggest fear is that they change things on the margin, but at the end of the day, the fundamental policy doesn't change, and that's not going to do any good either.
Right. Thank you. And Brett, you want to talk about today?
I have never been one to play devil's advocate when it comes to the state education department. But a couple of weeks ago, I attended a crisis in K-12 panel up in Rochester, and the commissioner was on the panel and heard from some professors as well. And they're dealing with schools that have 48% graduation rate, 20% absenteeism every single day, 3% math proficiency on the state test, 1% math ELA proficiency on the state test. I mean, that's just crazy. So they are trying to deal with a roaring forest fire, and we're just getting swept up in the crush. So
Collateral damage.
we're collateral damage, and I think it's really important that we keep our voices up, and hopefully they can start differentiating and not drag us along for the firefight. So I have a couple of board meetings ago, it feels like we talked about the resolutions and the voting, and I have just a real quick report on some of the resolutions that passed are to create a law to modify the schedule and frequency of state testing. I mean, these are lobbying points for the New York State School Boards Association. Interesting one, grant public schools really the same exemptions from law and regulations as granted charters. Right? They're exempt, make us exempt. There was a question of, well, shouldn't charters have the same burdens we have? And that was defeated. But let's all be freed from some of these laws and regulations which keep us off our mission. Probably the biggest emphasis is the resolution to redesign a valid APPR process that actually promotes student learning. And, that's along the lines of the Governor's Commission. It's crazy. Pass a law and then study how it should be passed. It's cart before the horse kind of thing. There was a resolution passed to urge the state lawmakers to pass a law which assumed the cost of the veterans' tax exemptions. That was an issue we talked about here some time ago. And I told you I was going to vote against the one of state intervention in fiscally mismanaged districts, and in fact that one was defeated. Nobody knows what it means to be fiscally mismanaged, and the state actually already has authority to come in and remove Board of Education members for breach of fiduciary duty and things like that. So there didn't seem to be any need to pass something that was so vague. And none of the resolutions that were not recommended for adoption by the Resolutions Committee passed. So we had some discussion on that. None of them passed. Some of them were NISBA. They were all sort of NISBA internal operations kind of things. And the feeling was that we were really telling NISBA what they should do marching order-wise, vis-a-vis Albany and Washington. And that's my report on that. And we have a West Putt board meeting this Thursday night, and you mentioned the meeting with our state senator coming up. So that's it. That's all I have.
The resolution for NISBA to disclose their funding sources and salaries, that That didn't go anywhere?
That didn't go anywhere because not only did they assure us that they don't take funding from any of these perceived horribles, the big corporations that are lobbying for, the testing and things like that, but, they held up the book of all the vendors, for example, in that come at the convention. Every vendor pays them money to have a booth and to get space in their book, It would just be a real burden for them to disclose all of those little things. And they say they don't take any, major funding things. There was one thing that they took, a minuscule amount of money last year, but all, the superintendent's group took it, the teachers group took it. It was, I don't want to say what the number was, something $5,000 that every group got, and that was what was the impetus for somebody saying, hey, I don't agree with that group, they're trying to promote charter schools. Well, the NISBA used it to create, some of their webcasts on these topics. So, there was a general sense that there was trust in the board for doing their job, and we shouldn't legislate, micromanage, and there wasn't really an issue worthy of that type of requirement. And similarly on the salaries, they are a 501c1 corporation, not a 501c3. And that is a tax exempt organization created by the state legislature. So they have, their pensions, I think, are part of the ERS system, and they are authorized to take taxpayer money as their dues. That's how the legislature, created them. So they're not subject to the disclosure requirements as any government entity would be. And the notion was that by allowing them to keep confidential their internal compensation structure, it allows them to pay competitive salaries and not operate like a government entity. So there was an overwhelming sense that there was a lot of trust in the board's operations and discretion in doing what they're doing.
Thank you for attending that for all of us. I assume that they'll probably send out the resolutions in their formal form sooner. They'll be on their website.
Yeah, there is a position statement that is updated every year, so they'll be coming out with a new position statement that will incorporate all of the new resolutions. And West Putt itself is, the APPR resolution came from Brewster, and so West Putt is going to not only write our legislators about our intended efforts in that regard, but also copy all of our school districts so that everybody knows that our theme for the year is an APPR system that actually is valid. And I don't know how you get there without rebooting. I heard that word used by the governor as far as Common Core implementation. That's as far as I've heard, as close as I've heard to an I'm sorry I shoved this down your throat so fast. But, that, like you said, it's a window, there's progress, and we're going to keep the heat on.
Great, thank you. Okay, anybody have any other board reports, committee reports? Okay, any requests for future information? Okay, and communications to the board? None that I'm aware of. Okay, can I have a motion to approve our board minutes from October 6, 2015?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, any changes? I had one, minor one. Brett was called Mrs. Summers. Did you catch it?
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Let me see where it was.
I'm
Just a
gender
minor
fluid
thing.
now.
I was like, wait, Jane was at the meeting? I don't remember that. It was under item 14 in parentheses, you called it. I was like, okay. Anything more substantive, anybody? Okay. All in favor of the approval of those board minutes then? Okay. And as I said, the board met in executive session beforehand to discuss the 2 items I previously mentioned. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, good night, thank you for watching. Thanks, everybody.